The massive alien ship appeared near Earth's moon on a Tuesday morning. It was bigger than any building humans had ever made, shaped like a crystal that caught starlight and threw it back in rainbow colors. Every space station, every military base, every government on Earth watched as the ship just sat there. Waiting, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the orbital defense platform, looking at the readings his crew gave him. The ship wasn't moving. It wasn't threatening. It was just there, like it was waiting for an invitation to tea. "Sir, they're sending a message," said his communications officer. "It's in perfect English." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Perfect English?" "Yes, sir. They say they want to meet with Earth's leaders. They're calling themselves the Galactic Council." Down on Earth, President Lisa Carter sat in the White House Situation Room with her top advisors. Secretary of Defense Paul Bennett pulled up holographic displays showing the alien vessel from every angle their satellites could manage. "They've been out there for 6 hours," Bennett said. "No hostile moves, no weapons we can detect. They just keep asking politely if they can talk." "What do they want to talk about?" Carter asked. "They want to welcome us to galactic civilization," came the reply from Admiral Kevin Hayes, who was monitoring communications. "They say it's standard procedure when a species develops spaceflight." Carter leaned back in her chair. Something about this felt too easy, too convenient. "Get our best people on this. I want to know everything about these visitors before we say a word to them." Dr. Susan Rodriguez had been studying alien signals for 3 days straight. As Earth's lead xenolinguist, she was fascinated by how the aliens communicated. They didn't just speak English perfectly. They spoke every human language perfectly. Their translation system was so advanced it made human computers look like pocket calculators. "They've been watching us," she told her team. "For years, maybe decades. They know our languages, our customs, even our political systems. This isn't first contact for them. This is just the first time they've said hello." The alien ambassador finally came aboard the orbital station a week after their arrival. Zix Thera looked like a tall, thin human, wearing robes made of light itself. The translator around its neck turned its musical voice into clear English. "Captain Morrison," the alien said with what might have been a smile, "we are honored to finally meet humanity face to face." Jake had been chosen to represent Earth because he was good at staying calm under pressure. Right now, that skill was being tested. "Welcome to our space, Ambassador. We appreciate your patience." "Patience is easy when the reward is so great," Zixthera replied. "We bring greetings from the Galactic Council. 12 species working together for 50,000 years to bring peace and prosperity to the galaxy." "That sounds impressive," Jake said carefully. "What exactly does that mean for us?" The alien's eyes brightened. "Everything, Captain Morrison. Technology beyond your dreams, worlds waiting to be explored. Your place in the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known." Jake nodded slowly. "And what would we need to do for all this?" "Simply join us," Zixthera said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Accept our guidance. Let us help you take your rightful place among the stars." "Guidance," Jake repeated. "What kind of guidance?" "We would help restructure your governments for galactic compatibility, provide you with proper technology to replace your primitive systems, guide your expansion to worlds suitable for human habitation, naturally under council oversight." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Restructure our governments?" "Of course. Your current system of competing nations is inefficient for galactic citizenship. We would help you organize under a single authority that reports to the council. It's quite painless, really. Most species find it liberating." Back on Earth, President Carter listened to the recording of Jake's conversation with growing unease. The alien's offer sounded generous, but the more she thought about it, the more it sounded like a polite way of saying, "Surrender everything that makes you human." "They want us to give up our independence," she said to her advisors, "in exchange for technology and protection we never asked for." "Ma'am," said Admiral Hayes, "what if they're offering us something genuinely beneficial? What if joining them really would make life better for humanity?" Carter stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city beyond. "Paul, How many times in human history has someone shown up offering to help us by taking control? Secretary Bennett nodded grimly. Every invasion in history started with someone claiming they were bringing civilization to the barbarians. Exactly. Carter said, maybe these aliens are different. Maybe they really do want to help. But I'm not willing to bet humanity's future on maybe. 2 days later, Captain Morrison delivered Earth's response to Ambassador Zixthera. The alien listened with growing confusion as Jake spoke. We thank the Galactic Council for their generous offer, Jake said. We're honored that you would consider us worthy of membership in your civilization. Excellent, Zixthera interrupted. When shall we begin the integration process? That's just it, Jake continued. We're going to have to decline. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the hum of the station's air recyclers. Zixthera stared at him as if he had just claimed the sky was green.
I'm sorry,
the alien said finally. I don't understand. You're declining. Membership in galactic civilization? We are, Jake confirmed. We appreciate the offer, but humanity prefers to develop on our own terms. But that's impossible, Zixthera stammered. No species has ever refused council membership. The benefits are obvious. The alternative is to remain isolated, primitive, alone in the darkness between stars. Jake smiled. Maybe we like the darkness. Maybe we want to light our own way through it. The alien ambassador left the station that day in a state of shock. In 50,000 years of galactic history, the council had never been refused. Species begged to join them. They competed for the honor of council membership, but humanity had just said no, and nobody in the galaxy knew what to do about it. 3 weeks after humanity's refusal, the Galactic Council was still trying to understand what had gone wrong. In the council chambers, a massive structure floating in space between 12 different star systems, Ambassador Zixthera stood before, the ruling assembly looking confused and embarrassed. They said no, Zixthera reported for the 5th time. I explained the benefits clearly. I showed them what council membership could offer. They thanked me politely and declined. Chancellor Vorthal, leader of the council for over 3 centuries, shifted uncomfortably in his crystalline chair. Perhaps they didn't understand the scope of what we were offering.
That's so too,
Zixthera replied.
But
their captain? Morrison was quite clear. They want to develop on their own terms, whatever that means. The council members looked at each other with the confusion of beings who had never encountered this problem before. For 50,000 years, every species they contacted had joined eagerly. Some negotiated for better terms. Others tried to impress the council with their achievements, but none had ever simply said no thank you. Clearly they need a demonstration, announced War Marshal Krevnax. Show them what council technology can accomplish. Once they see our capabilities, they'll understand their mistake. And so began what the council would later call the Demonstration Project. They selected a dead world in a system near Earth, a barren rock with no atmosphere and no life. Using their most advanced terraforming technology, they began transforming it into a paradise. Dr. Rachel Stone watched the alien terraforming project through Earth's most powerful telescopes. As head of the Global Environmental Analysis Team, she had been tasked with studying everything the aliens did. What she saw amazed and worried her in equal measure. They're reshaping an entire planet, she told her staff during their daily briefing. In 3 weeks, they've given it breathable atmosphere, created oceans, even established weather patterns. It's incredible. How are they doing it so fast? Asked her assistant, Dr. Tony Mitchell. Rachel pulled up detailed scans on the main screen. That's what concerns me. Look at these readings. The atmosphere processors they're using require constant maintenance. The water purification systems need regular replacement of core components. Even the soil they're creating depends on ongoing chemical treatment. Katie Pierce, the team's best engineer, studied the data with growing understanding. It's not self-sustaining. The whole planet depends on their technology to keep working. Exactly, Rachel said. It's beautiful, it's livable, but it's completely dependent on Galactic Council infrastructure. If they ever stopped maintaining it, the whole system would collapse within months. Meanwhile, Another alien ship arrived at Earth's orbital stations. This one was even larger than the first, filled with what the aliens called their greatest minds. Professor Veltar led a delegation of scientists, engineers, and scholars from across the galaxy. Dr. Susan Rodriguez found herself in charge of the scientific exchange program. The aliens were eager to share their knowledge, clearly expecting humans to be overwhelmed by their advanced understanding of physics, chemistry, and biology. Instead, the aliens found themselves answering increasingly pointed questions. "Your faster-than-light drive," said Dr. Mitchell during one of their sessions. "It requires connection to beacon networks scattered throughout the galaxy." "Yes," Professor Veltar replied proudly. "The Council maintains over 10 million hyperspace beacons. Any ship with proper authorization can use them." "What happens if a ship doesn't have authorization?" asked Katie Pierce. The alien professor looked puzzled. "Then it cannot travel faster than light, of course. The beacon network is carefully controlled to ensure galactic stability." Dr. Rodriguez and her team exchanged glances. Every piece of alien technology they examined had the same pattern. It was advanced, efficient, and completely dependent on Council-controlled infrastructure. On Earth, Colonel Danny Walsh was reaching similar conclusions from a military perspective. As head of strategic defense analysis, he had been studying the aliens' gift planet with a soldier's eye for tactics and logistics. "It's a trap," he told President Carter during their weekly briefing. "Not a malicious one, maybe, but a trap nonetheless. They're offering us a beautiful world that we could never maintain without their help." "Explain," said Secretary of Defense Bennett. Danny brought up a holographic display of the terraformed world. "Look at the infrastructure. Like everything connects. Back to Council systems, the power grid, the communication networks, the transportation systems. If we accepted this gift and moved people there, we'd be completely dependent on the Council for everything." General Frank Collins, Earth's senior military advisor, nodded grimly. "It's like accepting a house where someone else holds all the keys." President Carter studied the display with growing certainty that her initial instincts had been correct. "They're not offering us partnership. They're offering us a gilded cage." The aliens, meanwhile, were becoming increasingly frustrated with humanity's response to their generous demonstrations. Professor Veltar reported back to the Council that humans were indeed intelligent and capable of understanding advanced concepts. But they kept asking uncomfortable questions about independence and self-sufficiency. "They want to know how to build everything themselves," he complained to his colleagues. "When I show them our quantum computers, they ask about the principles behind them. When I explain our energy systems, they want to know if similar results could be achieved without our specific components." "Surely that's natural curiosity," suggested one of his assistants. "No," Veltar said with growing unease. "It's more than that. They're not asking how to use our technology. They're asking how to replace it." Back on Earth, Amy Thompson, the diplomatic liaison assigned to alien relations, was preparing for another meeting with the Council representatives. She had spent weeks studying their offers, their gifts, and their demonstrations. "What do we tell them about the terraformed world?" she asked President Carter. Carter looked out at the city beyond her office windows, at the millions of humans, living their independent lives, making their own choices, succeeding and failing on their own terms. "We thank them," she said finally. "We thank them for their generous gift, and we politely decline." "They're not going to understand," Amy warned. "No," Carter agreed. "They're not. But understanding isn't our responsibility. Our responsibility is to humanity." When Amy delivered Earth's response to the waiting alien delegation, the reaction was everything she had expected. Professor Veltar stared at her in disbelief. "You're refusing a fully terraformed world?" he asked. "A paradise created specifically for human habitation?" "We are," Amy replied calmly. "We appreciate the gesture, but we prefer to develop our own worlds using our own methods." "But your methods are primitive," Veltar protested. "Slow, inefficient, prone to failure," Amy smiled. "Maybe so, but they're ours." The alien delegation returned to their ship that day, carrying a message that would send shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Humanity had refused not just membership, but even the gifts meant to demonstrate the benefits of membership For the first time in their long history, the Council faced a species that valued independence more than efficiency, self-determination, more than perfection, and they had no idea what to do about it. The Galactic Council's intelligence division had never worked so hard on a single species before. For 2 months, their best analysts studied every piece of information they could gather about humanity. What they found made them increasingly uncomfortable. Intelligence Chief Carvex presented his findings to the full Council Assembly. The massive chamber fell silent as he began his report. "Humans are reverse engineering our technology," he announced without preamble. "Not copying it, understanding it." Within weeks of our first demonstrations, they had developed their own versions of systems it took us centuries to perfect. Chancellor Vorthal leaned forward in his chair. "Surely you mean they're trying to copy our designs?" "No, Chancellor. They're creating entirely different approaches that achieve similar results. Their methods are cruder, less efficient, but they work without any Council infrastructure." On Earth, Dr. Tony Mitchell was proving the Council's fears correct. Working in a converted warehouse in Colorado, he led a team of engineers who had spent every waking hour since first contact studying alien technology principles. "Look at this," he said to Katie Pierce, holding up a device no bigger than his fist. "Their quantum communicators need connection to Council relay stations. If we use this approach instead, we can achieve real-time communication across any distance without relying on their network." Katie examined the device with excitement. "It's not as elegant as theirs, but it's completely independent." "That's the point," Tony replied. "We're not trying to build better alien technology. We're building human technology that does the same." Across the compound, other teams were working on similar projects. Energy generation systems that didn't require Council fuel sources, faster-than-light engines that didn't need their beacon networks, weapons, shields, computers that worked on purely human principles. Commander Steve Parker watched these developments with a strategist's eye. As head of the Global Defense Analysis Unit, his job was to understand the bigger picture of humanity's situation. "We're not just building technology," he told his team during their morning briefing. "We're building independence." Major Beth Williams pulled up a holographic display showing the structure of Galactic Council territory. "Based on our analysis of their diplomatic approaches, every member species is locked into their system. They can't survive without Council's support." Lieutenant Colonel Greg Foster nodded agreement. "It's like a massive protection racket. Join us, and we'll take care of you. But once you're in, you can never leave because you can't take care of yourself anymore." And now, they've met a species that refuses to play by those rules, Steve concluded. "We're not just saying no to membership. We're proving that membership isn't necessary." The implications of this were not lost on the Galactic Council. Marshal Krevnax addressed the assembly with barely controlled anger. "This human independence is not just unusual," he declared. "It's dangerous. If other species see that it's possible to thrive without Council guidance, our entire system of governance could collapse." The War Marshal's words sent ripples of fear. Through the assembled representatives, the Council's power rested on the belief that membership was not just beneficial, but necessary for survival in a hostile galaxy. Back on Earth, Secretary of State Peter Davis was learning just how right the War Marshal was. His intelligence networks had begun picking up chatter from other parts of the galaxy. Species that had never questioned Council authority were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. "The Zephyrian colonies are requesting technical specifications for our independent communication systems," reported Dr. Jennifer Murphy, his chief analyst. 3 minor species have sent unofficial inquiries about human methods of space travel.
Al Johnson,
The team's economist pulled up trade data from across the galaxy. "The most interesting development is economic. Several Council member species are showing decreased reliance on Council trade networks. They're starting to develop direct relationships with each other. They're learning from our example," Peter realized. "We're not actively trying to undermine the Council, but our very existence as an independent species is doing exactly that." The Council's response was swift and desperate. They began offering humanity deals that had never been offered to any species before. Military alliances with no strings attached. trade agreements that favored human interests, cultural exchange, programs that promised to preserve human independence. Each offer was carefully reviewed by Earth's leadership and politely declined. "They're getting scared," observed President Carter during a cabinet meeting. "Every offer is more generous than the last, but they all have the same underlying assumption. That we'll eventually say yes to something," agreed Admiral Kevin Hayes. "Exactly. They can't conceive of a species that genuinely doesn't want what they're offering." Dr. Susan Rodriguez, who had been monitoring alien communications, brought disturbing news to the next security briefing. "Their internal communications are becoming increasingly agitated," she reported. "They're not just confused anymore.
Yes.
They're afraid." "Of us?" asked Secretary Bennett. "Of what we represent," Susan clarified. "We've proven that their way isn't the only way. For a civilization built on the idea that they know what's best for everyone, that's terrifying." The truth of this assessment became clear when the Council made their next move. Instead of sending diplomats or scientists, they sent their military commander. War Marshal Krevnax arrived in the Sol system with an escort of warships, though he was careful to keep them at a respectful distance. His message to Earth was formal, but carried an undertone of threat. "The Galactic Council recognizes that humanity values its independence," the message began. "However, the Council has a responsibility to maintain galactic stability. Unguided expansion by independent species has historically led to conflict and chaos." President Carter listened to the message with her full cabinet present. The aliens. Words were diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. "They're giving us an ultimatum," she said when the message ended. "Join voluntarily, or face the consequences." "What kind of consequences?" asked General Collins. Admiral Hayes pulled up tactical displays of the alien fleet. "They have enough firepower to sterilize Earth's surface, but they're not positioning for an attack. They're positioning for a blockade. They're going to try to isolate us," Carter realized. "Cut us off from the galaxy until we have no choice but to ask for their help." The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. The Council was going to try to force humanity into dependence by denying them access to the very independence they valued, said Secretary Davis. "What if they're right? What if unguided expansion really does lead to chaos?" Carter looked around the room at her advisors, at the men and women who had helped humanity reach this crossroads. "Then we'll face that chaos as free beings," she said finally. "Better to fail on our own terms than succeed on someone else's." The die was cast. Humanity had chosen independence over security, freedom over guidance, uncertainty over the promise of protection. The Galactic Council prepared to show them the price of that choice. The blockade began on a Monday morning. Admiral Janet Brooks watched from the bridge of Earth's newest orbital defense platform as dozens of alien warships took positions around the Sol system. They formed a perfect sphere, cutting off every route to and from human space. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the Council fleet," reported her communications officer. "Put it through," Janet ordered. War Marshal Krevnax appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features stern and unforgiving. "Admiral Brooks, I am authorized by the Galactic Council to inform you that the Sol system is now under protective quarantine." "Protective quarantine?" Janet asked calmly. "For the safety of galactic civilization, humanity will remain confined to this system until you accept Council guidance. No human vessels will be permitted to leave. No unauthorized contact with other species will be allowed." Janet nodded, as if this was a reasonable weather report. "And how long do you expect this quarantine to last?" "Until your species comes to its senses," Krevnax replied. "The Council is patient, but not infinitely so." The transmission ended, leaving Janet alone with her thoughts. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders that would either save humanity or doom it. "Get me Fleet Commander Sanders," she said finally. Fleet Commander Rick Sanders had been expecting this call. As head of Earth's rapidly expanding space fleet, he had been preparing for this moment since the first alien ship arrived. "The blockade is complete," he reported to Janet. 47 Council warships, each one capable of destroying our entire fleet. "What about the new ships?" Janet asked. Rick smiled grimly. "That's where things get interesting. Project Independence is ready for its first test. Project Independence had been humanity's secret weapon, developed in hidden shipyards throughout the outer solar system. While the Council had been focused on diplomatic pressure, human engineers had been working around the clock on something unprecedented. Dr. Andrew King stood in the main laboratory of Titan Base, looking at the fruits of 3 months of desperate work. The prototype drive core hummed quietly in its housing, no bigger than a car, but containing technology that could change everything. "Are you sure it will work?" asked Patricia Green, the project's chief engineer. "As sure as we can be without testing it," Andrew replied. "The theoretical framework is sound. We've run every simulation we can think of." Tim Rogers, the systems analyst who had helped design the control systems, looked nervous. "The Council's hyperspace beacons work because they create stable corridors through subspace. Our approach is more like punching holes wherever we want to go." "Crude but effective," Patricia agreed. "If it works, it'll work," Andrew said with more confidence than he felt. "It has to." The first test ship launched from Titan Base while the Council fleet was focused on monitoring Earth's orbital platforms. Commander Julie Martinez piloted the small vessel, knowing that she was either about to make history or become a footnote in humanity's final chapter. "All systems green," she reported over the encrypted communication link. "Initiating jump sequence." The prototype drive activated with a sound like tearing fabric. Reality twisted around the small ship, and for a moment that lasted eternity. Julie Martinez existed nowhere and everywhere at once. Then she was through. Emerging from hyperspace near Jupiter's moons, having traveled a distance that should have taken hours in mere seconds. "Jump successful," she reported, her voice shaking with excitement. "No Council infrastructure required. We did it."
On Earth.
President Carter received the news with a mixture of relief and anticipation. The prototype worked, but now came the real test. "How many ships do we have ready?" she asked Admiral Brooks during their emergency meeting. 17 with the new drive systems, Janet replied. "More coming online every day, but we've been working in secret. Council doesn't know what we've accomplished." "They're about to find out," Carter said grimly. "Send the message." The message was broadcast on every frequency the Council fleet was monitoring. Captain Robert Clark, commanding the lead ship of humanity's new fleet, delivered it personally. "Marshal Krevnax, this is Captain Clark of the Earth Defense Force. We thank you for your concern about galactic stability. But we must respectfully inform you that we do not recognize your authority to quarantine our system." "Captain Clark," came the immediate reply, "you are greatly outnumbered. Your primitive vessels are no match for Council warships. Surrender now and no harm will come to your people." "With respect, Marshal, we're not here to fight you. We're here to leave." What happened next would be remembered as the moment everything changed. The 17 human ships activated their new drive systems simultaneously. Disappearing from the Sol system in flashes of twisted space-time, the Council fleet watched in stunned silence as humanity simply vanished. Reappearing moments later, scattered throughout the galaxy, Major Nicole White, commanding a reconnaissance vessel, emerged near the Arcturus system and immediately began scanning for inhabitable worlds. Commander Martinez found herself in a previously unexplored sector, making contact with a species the Council had never encountered. Captain Clark materialized near the galactic rim, in regions the Council considered too dangerous to patrol. Within hours, human ships were appearing everywhere, exploring systems the Council kept off limits, making contact with civilizations that had never heard of galactic government, proving that the galaxy was much larger and more diverse than Council maps suggested. War Marshal Krevnax found himself in an impossible position. His blockade had become meaningless overnight. Humanity hadn't just escaped. They had demonstrated that Council control of galactic travel was an illusion. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his science officers. "Their technology is primitive. They can't simply ignore our beacon network." "Sir," his chief analyst reported with obvious reluctance, "they appear to have developed independent faster-than-light capability. Their ships are traveling through hyperspace without any connection to Council infrastructure." The implications hit Krevnax like a physical blow. Humanity could travel independently, So could any other species with sufficient motivation. The Council's monopoly on interstellar travel, the foundation of their power, had just been shattered. Back on Earth, President Carter addressed the world with news that would reshape human civilization. "My fellow humans," she began, "today we proved that freedom is not just an ideal, but a reality we can create for ourselves. The galaxy is open to us, not as subjects of some distant council, but as free beings exploring our own destiny." Broadcast was picked up by council monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Other species heard Carter's words and began asking questions their governments couldn't answer. If humans could achieve independence, why couldn't they? War Marshal Krevnak stared at his tactical displays, watching human ships spread across the galaxy like seeds on the wind. His blockade fleet still surrounded the Sol system, but they were guarding an empty stable. The horses had already run free. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving urgent messages from Council headquarters. The Zephyrian colonies have declared independence. The Arctilian territories are demanding technological autonomy. 3 species have formally requested human assistance in developing independent space travel." Krevnax closed his eyes. In one day, humanity had done what 50,000 years of council rule had prevented. They had shown the galaxy that there was another way. The blockade had failed before it truly began. Humanity was loose among the stars, and with them, the idea that freedom was possible. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the failed blockade, Supreme Chancellor Vorthal sat in his crystal chamber watching his empire crumble. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy, each one worse than the last. The Zephyrian rebellion has spread to 17. World's Intelligence Chief Carvex reported with barely concealed panic. They're using human-designed technology to maintain independence from Council infrastructure. "The Arctilian territories?" Vorthal asked warily. "Completely autonomous? They've established direct trade with human colonies and 12 other species. They no longer require Council approval for anything." Vorthal's crystalline features darkened. "How many species have requested human assistance?" 43 at last count, Carvex replied, "and the humans are helping them. Not conquering, not controlling, just sharing technology and knowledge freely." The Chancellor turned to stare out at the stars, at the galaxy that had once bowed to Council wisdom. "What are the humans doing out there?" Captain Laura Stevens commanded the human exploration vessel New Horizons, currently stationed in what the Council called the Forbidden Zone. The region was supposedly too dangerous for civilized species, filled with cosmic anomalies and hostile life forms. In reality, Laura had discovered it was home to dozens of fascinating civilizations that the Council had simply never bothered to contact. "Captain," called her science officer, "we're receiving a response from the Void Dwellers." Laura smiled. The Void Dwellers were an ancient species that lived in the empty spaces between stars, traveling in massive generation ships that the Council had spent millennia trying to locate. Humans had found them in 3 weeks simply by asking other species if they had seen any massive ships wandering around. "What do they say?" Laura asked. "They're interested in cultural exchange. They want to know more about our music, our art, our stories. In return, they're offering to share their stellar engineering techniques." It was a pattern Laura had seen throughout the galaxy. Species eager to share knowledge and culture, but who had been locked into the Council's rigid hierarchy for so long they had forgotten how to interact freely with each other. Dr. Victor Hughes was experiencing the same phenomenon at his research station on the Galactic Rim. The outpost had become a hub for independent scientific research, with species from across the galaxy coming to share discoveries without Council oversight. The quantum mechanics breakthrough came from combining Altarian mathematics with Centauri engineering and human intuition, he explained to his mixed species research team. "None of our civilizations could have achieved this alone, but together we've revolutionized energy production." The Council always insisted that research had to be coordinated through their institutes, observed Dr. Kielthara, a former Council scientist who had defected months earlier. "They said uncontrolled research was dangerous." "Maybe it is, Victor. Admitted, but it's also the only way to make real breakthroughs. You can't discover new things if you're not allowed to explore new ideas." Back on Earth, Ambassador Sandra Bailey prepared for what might be her final meeting with council representatives. The diplomatic situation had become increasingly tense as more species chose independence over council membership. They've requested an emergency meeting, she told Deputy Ambassador Gary Miller. Chancellor Vorthal himself is coming. What do you think they want? Asked Helen Rodriguez, the cultural liaison who had been monitoring council communications. It's probably to blame. Us for everything that's happening, Sandra replied. They can't accept that species might choose independence because they genuinely prefer it. The meeting took place on a neutral space station. It's one of the few remaining facilities that both humans and the council considered safe territory. Chancellor, Vorthal arrived with a small delegation, looking older and more tired than in any previous transmission. Ambassador Bailey, he began without pleasantries, the Galactic Council faces an unprecedented crisis. Our civilization, which has maintained peace and prosperity for 50,000 years, is collapsing because of your species' influence. Sandra nodded calmly. We're sorry to hear about your difficulties, Chancellor. How can we help? Eyes flashed with anger. You can stop spreading this poison of independence throughout the galaxy. You can stop encouraging other species to abandon the system that has served them well for millennia. With respect, Chancellor, we're not encouraging anyone to do anything. We're simply living our lives according to our own values. Are destroying galactic civilization, Vorthal snapped. Or maybe, Sandra replied gently, they're showing the galaxy what civilization could become. The Chancellor leaned back, his anger replaced by something like despair. Do you have any idea what you've done? The Council maintained order across millions of worlds. We prevented wars, guided technological development, ensured that dangerous species couldn't threaten galactic peace. And in return, you made sure no species could ever be truly free, Sandra observed. Freedom, Vorthal said the word like. It tasted bitter. What good is freedom if it leads to chaos? What value is independence if it results in conflict and suffering? Sandra considered the question seriously. It was one that had kept human philosophers busy for centuries. Chaos is better than stagnation, she said finally. Maybe the possibility of failure is worth the chance of something better. President Carter received the report of Sandra's meeting with mixed feelings. The council was clearly desperate, but desperation could make them dangerous in ways that mere anger never could. They're offering us anything we want, Sandra reported. Territory, technology, even a seat on the council itself. In exchange, they want us to publicly endorse their system and stop helping other species achieve independence. What did you tell them? Carter asked. That we'd consider their offer, Sandra replied, but we both know what the answer is. Carter nodded. The answer had been the same from the beginning, when Captain Morrison first met Ambassador Zixthora. Humanity valued its independence too much to trade it for anything the Council could offer. Draft our final response, Carter instructed. Make it clear that we're not their enemies, but we're not their subjects either. The response was delivered the next day, broadcast across the galaxy for all species to hear. President Carter herself delivered the message, standing in the same Oval Office where she had first made the decision to refuse council membership. To the Galactic Council and all the peoples of the galaxy, she began, humanity has no desire for conflict or dominion. We do not seek to rule other species or tear down existing institutions. She paused, looking directly into the camera that would carry her words to billions of beings across the stars. But we will not surrender our freedom to purchase peace. We will not trade our independence for security. The galaxy is vast enough for many different approaches to civilization. The message continued with humanity's promise to help any species that wanted to achieve independence, to share knowledge freely, and to treat all beings as equals rather than subjects. We invite the Galactic Council to join us in this new approach, Carter concluded. Not as rulers and subjects, but as partners in exploring what civilization can become when it's built on freedom rather than control. The response from across the galaxy was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had spent millennia under council rule began declaring independence in numbers, too large for the council to suppress. The rigid hierarchy that had governed galactic civilization for 50,000 years dissolved in a matter of months. Some species chose to remain with the Council, preferring security to independence. Others formed new alliances based on mutual cooperation rather than hierarchical control. The galaxy became more diverse, more chaotic, and more free than it had ever been. Years later, historians would mark humanity's first refusal of Council membership as the moment galactic civilization grew up. When intelligent species stopped looking for parents and started thinking for themselves, the Council's terror had been justified. Humanity had indeed destroyed their civilization, but in its place, something better had begun to grow.